VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you for joining us today here on Crosstalk. Jim Schneider with you today. Folks, there is so much that is going on in the news. Even as we speak, we understand that the jury with pertaining to the Kermit Gosnell trial has reached a verdict. We're kind of monitoring what is taking place with that at this moment. We learned just a short time ago that they've reached a verdict. That verdict has not been made known as of yet. This morning on a couple charges, they came to the judge and said that we have a hung jury on two of the charges. The judge, we understand, told them to revisit those issues as well as to go back and look at all the other issues that are presently being contemplated at this time. Certainly the Benghazi thing is just heating up, and it's like a building up steam right now. And on Fox News over the weekend, learned that the presidents of ABC and CBS have siblings that work at the White House with ties to the Benghazi incident. Could it be that there are issues that are not being reported by the major news media because of ties to Benghazi? Well, these are just a few of the things going on. But folks, we're going to concentrate today on a very important matter that is going before the courts as well. And this time it is Obamacare that is once again being challenged in the courts. Representing Liberty University in this is attorney Mat Staver, who is the founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. They are an international nonprofit litigation, education, and policy organization dedicated to advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of life, and the family. Matt, welcome back to Crosstalk.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Matt, this week, Thursday, you will be arguing before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, and you have described this as one of the most important oral arguments of your legal career. Tell us what's happening and what's at stake here.
Well, this is significant because this is Obamacare. Everyone obviously knows and is beginning to realize the impact of this. I don't think anyone has a clue as to how this is going to literally reshape America, destroy our liberties, and how much of an abortion funding provision this particular act is. So in many ways, this is significant because it will ultimately affect every single person, not only with regards to their health care, but also with regards to their payments, their taxes, their ability to access care when they need it, and also just their liberties, and particularly the religious liberty and the sanctity of human life. So that's why it's so significant. I will argue this coming Thursday at the Federal Court of Appeals, and this case is being directed back to the Court of Appeals by the United States Supreme Court itself. Back in late November, the Supreme Court ordered the Court of Appeals to rehear our case. I've already argued this in the district court, the lower trial court, the Court of Appeals, and then it went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And our issue of the first day of the 3 days of oral arguments was the one that was put before the court. And so after the court made its ruling, the court essentially suggested that that was the end of the line for our case. We asked them to reconsider and reverse their decision on that, and they did, which that means that there's at least 5 justices on the United States Supreme Court that are still interested in hearing more about Obamacare. And then they ordered the Court of Appeals to rehear our case, and that's why I'm back at the Court of Appeals later this week.
Well, many times, Matt, when we think about the Affordable Care Act, which we're dubbing Obamacare, and Mr. Obama himself calls it Obamacare, didn't the U.S. Supreme Court already validate the constitutionality of Obamacare?
No, they only upheld the individual mandate as it relates to it being supported by the taxing and spending clause. But there's a whole lot of other things that are up for grabs, particularly the employer mandate. No decision has ever been rendered as to whether that's supported by the Commerce Clause that allows Congress to regulate interstate commerce, or the taxing and spending clause. Mm-hmm. And also, even Justice Ginsburg, in her concurring and dissent, said that even if you have a mandate that requires you to buy a product, it could still be unconstitutional if it collides with other constitutionally protected rights, such as freedom of speech and free exercise of religion. So here our case has the most comprehensive challenge in existence to any other cases that are out there. There's about 60 cases or so that have been filed recently in the last year or so challenging what's called the HHS mandate with respect to employers having to provide contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs, along with IUDs that also are abortifacients in some cases. That's the challenge that they have. Our challenge contains that, but we also challenge the entirety of the employer mandate. The employer mandate, we argue, is unconstitutional under any circumstance. And also we argue that it's unconstitutional because it forces people to collide with their religious free exercise.
And I believe that's one of the other tenets of your case here, and that is you're challenging the abortion mandate for religious employers.
We're challenging the abortion mandate for religious employers. We're challenging the abortion mandate for individuals because that's never been decided yet. We're saying that if, in fact, the individual mandate is a tax, then it's violative of other constitutional principles because it did not originate in the House. It originated in the Senate, and taxing bills must originate in the House, not the Senate. This originated in the Senate, not the House. But also we're saying that the entirety of the employer mandate, in addition to the fact that it collides with the free exercise of religion under statutory and constitutional provisions, it doesn't have any support under the Commerce Clause or the Taxing and Spending Clause. The Supreme Court said that Congress doesn't have the authority under the Commerce Clause to force an individual to buy an unwanted product. Well, if they don't have authority to force an individual to buy an unwanted product, they don't have the authority to force an employer to buy an unwanted product. They then said, well, it's upheld as a tax, and the reason is the amount of money that you pay for a penalty is minimal, under $100, and then it gradually gets up to over $100, then close to $300 by cost of living. But the amount of insurance that you'd have to pay if you're going to buy insurance is several $1,000s. So comparing the penalty to the actual premium, it's a minimal penalty. It looks more like a tax, they said. I disagree with them, but that's what they said. But now, the employer mandate is so much different. The employer mandate is punitive. Taxes cannot be what's called punitive. In this case, if Liberty University refuses to cover any of its employees, it pays $2,000 per employee per year. For Liberty, that's going to amount to about $14 million per year. Now, if Liberty does cover its employees with insurance but refuses to offer the preventative mandate, it pays all of the premiums that it normally would to cover its employees, and it pays $14 million again. But beyond that, it also pays additional penalty. There's an additional penalty that if you violate the provision of the insurance law as a self-insured, you pay $100 per person per day for as long as the violation continues. But if you haven't corrected the violation within 30 days, it goes to $2,500 per employee. And if it's extensive, which this would be, it's $15,000 per day per employee. Liberty University has 6,900 employees. It would be fined, in addition to the $2,000 per year, $14 million, it would be fined $15,000 per day for every one of its employees for as long as it was in noncompliance. It's staggering. You're talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. And that can't be a tax. You can't have a tax that ultimately is designed to destroy and punish.
Matt, the outcome of your case, will it only affect Liberty?
Well, no. If it in fact guts the employer mandate, it strikes it down for everyone. And that would mean that essentially the engine of Obamacare would be taken out of the car. Just like the employee mandate or the individual mandate, the employer mandate is integral and necessary to this bill, this law. So if we strike that down, it goes across the board to religious and secular employers, every employer. Now, if we strike down the employer mandate with regards to the religious institutions, that may not kill the entire bill, but it certainly puts a big hole in the boat because that would mean any religious employer, including secular as well as nonprofit, could opt out. And that'll put a big gaping hole in Obamacare as well. If we ultimately prevail under the fact that if this didn't originate in the House, then the entire bill goes, because taxing bills have to originate in the House. It's been designed that way so that the people cannot be taxed without their representation. You want to have their closest representative be the ones passing taxing bills. And that's why the Constitution put this authority only in the House to originate these revenue-raising bills, not the Senate.
And the Senate was the originator of Obamacare.
Yeah, the Senate, what happened was there was a bill that came from the House, but it had nothing to do with Obamacare at all. It had an HR number, and it was related to veterans and housing. And when it came over to the Senate, Senator Harry Reid struck the title and struck the entire body. So the only thing that's left is the House bill number. Nothing else left. It's completely blank page. And in place of it, he inserted the new title, which is the Patient Affordable Act, and 2,000-plus pages of Obamacare. None of that originated in the House. It all originated in the Senate, and that was passed on December 24, Christmas Eve, 2009. Mm-hmm. And the House just simply affirmed it. You cannot amend something that is unlike what the bill is. If the House were to give a taxing bill to the Senate to have taxes to purchase desks, the Senate could say, well, let's add chairs because they go along with it. But the Senate couldn't say, we want to put something completely unrelated to this bill, mm-hmm. Because it has to be related to what ultimately the House is passing to them with respect to taxes. And this was completely different. Not a word of this originated in the House. Tell
us about the three judges that you'll be appearing before on Thursday.
Well, we won't know which three judges they will be. We won't know until the day of the oral argument. However, the three judges that I appeared before in the last round were two judges that were appointed by President Obama and one that was appointed by President Clinton. It is likely that I'll have that same panel again, although we won't know until that day. But either way, no matter what the panel is, I think everyone realizes that this is a very significant aspect of the case, but likely not the last step. The last step will ultimately be back to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The stunning news last week, the Obama administration recently surrendered in their case against Tyndale House Publishers,
yes.
A Bible publisher who the Obama administration argued was not religious enough for a religious exemption to the mandate. How does that Tyndale issue impact your case?
Well, I think it impacts us significantly. You know, the fact of the matter is that they got an injunction against them in the District Court of Columbia Court. The Department of Justice appealed it to the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, and while it was pending on appeal, they decided to withdraw their appeal, meaning that they are agreeing with and accepting the preliminary injunction down below. That has happened less than 2 weeks before I argue the case. I will certainly point that out to the court. The fact that they are willing to abide by this other preliminary injunction, I think, gives good argument to our case. And in fact, what we have now is the Sixth Circuit, the Seventh Circuit, and the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals all now issuing preliminary injunctions pending the appeal. Now, I think that is strong evidence with regards to the religious free exercise. I think on the religious free exercise claim, the government has a weak and significantly losing position.
Mat Staver with us today on Crosstalk. Matt is going to be arguing before the appellate court his challenge, Liberty University versus Geithner, challenging Obamacare. We'll be back in just 60 seconds. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and author at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how long does it take for tissue to fossilize?
Chris, fossilization is said to take long periods of time, but there are many examples of fossilization occurring rather rapidly. This is when the living cells are replaced by stony material. The claim of millions of years to fossilize something simply isn't true. Consider the flip side of the coin. Recently, dinosaur tissue has been found that wasn't fossilized at all. In fact, it was still soft and even has red blood cells within the bones. Soft, fresh tissue must be young. How in the world could evolutionists claim that these things are 70 million years old? It doesn't make any sense, but of course, the whole evolutionary story doesn't make any sense. How much better to go back to Genesis and get your starting point right.
For more on Genesis, visit our website at icr.org. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. And friends, it gets my attention when I get an email from Mat Staver, and he says that he will be presenting one of the most important oral arguments of his legal career against the tyrannical, unconstitutional, and immoral mandates contained in Obamacare. We're talking about that issue today, as Matt will be appearing before the appellate court this coming Thursday of this very week. Matt, both Senator Max Baucus and Senator Harry Reid have, and there have been others, have said that the Affordable Care Act will be, quote, a train wreck if not properly implemented. That doesn't give the American people a whole lot of confidence and comfort, does it?
No, and in fact, Senator Max Baucus actually was in favor of Obamacare, and now he says it's a train wreck.
And he also announced he's not going to run for office again.
Yeah, no wonder why, because, it's a huge mistake for anyone who voted for this. And, the 15-member panels that Sarah Palin was criticized for calling the death panels,
yeah.
I think she was more right, they've not been able to appoint anyone to those panels. It's completely empty, vacant, because people, even those who were in favor of Obamacare, do not want to put their future careers on the line under this particular monstrosity. What we have here is a situation that is absolutely, unbelievably unworkable. And it will hurt, as I had said before, it will increase the cost of health care. We've already seen that happen. We've already seen reports just as recently as today how certain prescription drugs are going to cost people a lot more money, how health insurance premiums are going to cost a lot more money. And I think we've also said, and I think we're seeing this too, how it's going to decrease the quality of health care. This month of May, a friend of mine, Dr. Torres, is a medical doctor in Central Florida. He is closing his private practice solely because of Obamacare. Wow. And he says, and I know of other physicians that are doing the same thing.
Matt, at the same time, and here we have these leaders. Max Baucus, of course, was one of the drafters of this as well. But even more Democrats who voted for Obamacare are now coming out. They're voicing their concern over these increased premiums you just talked about, these higher insurance rates, the increasing cost of health care. Weren't they warned of this before they voted for it?
They were warned of it. Obviously, we said this, and other people had said this as well. But this was not about what was in the bill. This was a political ideology that was being driven by the president and Harry Reid, and then at the time Nancy Pelosi, and the very radical socialist machinery. That's really what was driving this. And as Nancy Pelosi said, we laughed about it back then and mocked it. You have to read the bill to know what's in it. You know what? There's a lot of things that I disagree with Nancy Pelosi about, but that's exactly right. None of these people really fully understood what was in this bill.
And they're still writing it, aren't they?
They're still, the regulations are in the tens of thousands of pages right now. I think their regulations already are at 20,000 pages. We have several attorneys at Liberty Counsel that through the last 2.5 years have been spending a lot of time on this case. And we still have to sit down and go through and say, now, what did that say, and what does that mean? And you have to go outside of the statute into some other place. This other provision that we have just recently discovered, in addition to this penalty of $2,000 per employee if you don't cover, or if you do cover, $2,000 if you don't have what's called essential coverage, which could include no preventative coverage, which that's the abortion mandate. This other provision is outside of Obamacare and references Obamacare. It's part of an insurance program, an insurance regulation bill, but it also applies to self-insureds. And they amended it to put in the title of this Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare law, so that now you have this $100 per day fine, but only if you correct it within 30 days. And if you don't, that $100 a day per employee fine jumps to $2,500. And if they say that it's more than de minimis, in other words, if it's more than just a minimal violation, which cutting out this abortion coverage across the board would be more than minimal in their view, it jumps from $2,500 to $15,000. Now, you do the math on that. Take $15,000 times 6,900 people, and that's just your fine for one day.
My.
And that's in addition to the other $2,000 per employee per year fine. This thing is designed to crush employers. It is designed to force you into submission. It will put you out of business if you make a misstep. So a lot of these employers, they have no clue what to do. You have this whole, take, for example, Liberty University. We represent Liberty University and two private individuals. But Liberty University has a lot of adjunct, part-time professors all over the country. These are people that don't want to teach full-time. They may have other full-time jobs, and so they will do adjunct teaching online at night or during the day where they have certain times. Well, now we have to figure out, and every other university and college has to figure out, are these people working 30 hours a week? How do you figure that out for a professor? It's not like you punch a clock. It's a different scenario in some of those situations. You're teaching a class for a certain amount of time, but how much time do you spend preparing for it? There's a huge amount of uncertainty out there as to what the financial impact that all of these employers, including Liberty, are going to face. And so when you're wanting to increase your employment outreach, hire more people, employers are pulling back because they have no clue what they're getting ready to run into in the next several months.
Matt, last Friday, President Obama just really seemed to, dig his heels in and stepped up his sales pitch for this government takeover of health care. He said, quote, "The law is here to stay." If he's correct, that is here to stay, what does our future of health care look like?
It's not very good. If this is here to stay, we're going to go down the socialist machinery like Great Britain and Canada did. And Canada is already laboring under their single-payer system. They can't afford it, and people can't get care. Same in Canada. It may cover your common cold, but you have a significant knee, back injury, heart condition, kidney problems, you're not going to be able to get treatment. And the treatment is going to be subpar, sub-quality. It is someone that I know recently, for example, out in Washington State, was trying to get a hand injury resolved through their state system. And Washington State was in favor of Obamacare. Well, they can't afford to have their care out there, and you're not going to be able to have the care here. So what they did is they sent this individual to a person who is not an orthopedic expert. They tried to patch the hand. They never did set it. Came back, and they criticized her for moving her hand. She hadn't moved her hand. Bottom line, she got into an orthopedic surgery 2 weeks later. The orthopedic surgery was stunned at the kind of lack of treatment that she had. The bone has already been eaten away because of the way that they weren't able to set it, and they just simply said, go away. We don't have any more funds to help you. What's happening in Washington State with their state-provided low-income care is going to be the same thing that's going to happen across the United States. And the healthcare system that we know, the choices that we have, are simply going to not be there. I know for a fact people in the medical profession, doctors and others as well, are leaving the profession, getting out of the profession. I know doctors are selling their practices to hospitals because they just do not want to be bothered by this bureaucracy.
Matt, the reason we invited you on today was not only to inform, but to solicit the prayers of our listeners to crosstalk for you as you go before the court on Thursday. How can our listeners best be praying for you this Thursday as you go to court?
Well, pray that we ask you to pray for clarity in my presentation, and also clarity and understanding of the judges and their law clerks. Ultimately, we want victory. We want this particular law to be stopped. And it's not just for Thursday, because Thursday, that's the oral argument. But after the argument, they have to do the writing. And so that goes on for several months. So continue to keep the case in your prayers because it's very significant. And by the way, this is not going to be the last stop in the road, I don't believe. I think this will go back to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think this is one of the most significant issues that we're facing. It is by far the biggest funding of abortion in history in several ways. There's the so-called preventative care provision, and that requires these forced abortifacients. Now, the FDA has classified the so-called Plan B and Ella, the so-called emergency or morning after pills, as contraception. That's because they redefined the understanding of pregnancy. Pregnancy for you and I would be, well, we would think it's the moment of conception, when the human being becomes a human being, when the egg and sperm are meet and they become a fertilized egg and it becomes a human being. No, they classify pregnancy from at the time of implantation. Uh-huh. They say, so you got the moment of conception, and then implantation takes place next. So if you prevent something from either being on the wall of the uterus to implant, then they say that you're not pregnant. Well, the fact of the matter is, whether you're implanted on the uterine wall is irrelevant to whether you're a human being. From the moment of conception, that's the uniqueness of humanity. And so what they have said is that these are contraceptives. They're actually abortifacients. Ella prohibits, and the FDA will actually even say that sometimes it will prevent implantation. There are some situations where it can actually stop implantation once it's already started. So these are abortifacients. These are abortion-inducing drugs, and that will be in every plan. You're not going to be able to get out of it. You're not going to be able to have a plan that doesn't have this. And then there's others that would be on the exchanges, what's called a qualified plan. Some of those will have abortion coverage for surgical abortions. And even though you're not wanting to have an abortion, maybe you're not even eligible, you may be a young man or whatever, you will still have to pay $1 per month, and that goes into a fund that covers only abortion. In addition to your general premiums that you're paying, you have to pay an additional $1, and it goes into a segregated fund. We've never had that before, where here's a fund, and it's solely to cover abortion, and you're going to have to pay for it no matter your age and no matter your gender or no matter your religious objection. You're going to have to pay for abortion. So this is a huge abortion funding machine.
Mat Staver with us. Matt, when do you anticipate a decision from the court?
I would expect that we would have a decision sometime in the next couple of months, 2 to 3 at the outset, 3 at the outset, and then that would be sometime this summer. And then after that, whichever party loses will have the opportunity to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case, which would be sometime in the fall that the Supreme Court would get that request. And likely there could be an oral argument in the spring of or the early part of 2014, with a decision no later than June of 2014.
And folks, we're going to pick this up with Matt as to the ramifications of that, but I'd like to open our phone lines as well for you to start getting on board here with your questions and comments, and we'd also encourage you to let Matt know of your prayers as he goes before the appellate court this week and argues this case. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. How do you feel about being forced to pay for abortion? The forced mandates that are coming through, the employer mandate, the abortion mandate, yes, even for religious employers, the abortion mandate for individuals. Folks, we're talking about some important issues here today on Crosstalk. Our number, 800-733-9829. We'll be right back.
Marital conflict is increasing in our society. The commitment made to love and to cherish, sadly, is being discarded in many relationships. In 2012, a feature-length film was produced, which presents true commitment in marriage. Amazing Love is the story about a youth director and his wife, who take 5 teens from their youth group to the wilderness for 2 nights to camp out. 2 teen girls have a sharp argument that causes division. Tensions are high. The youth leader gathers all the kids and decides to tell the story of Hosea. Using flashback, the film takes you to Nazareth as the story of Hosea unfolds. It's a story of commitment, of keeping vows before God, of faithfulness and unconditional love. The DVD, Amazing Love, is available for a donation of $18 to VCY America. The story will impact teens and adults alike. To obtain this feature-length film, call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
certainly liberty is under attack right now. We're speaking with Mat Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. And Matt, a couple of things here I want to talk about. Before we get too far in, I want you to give out your website where people can stay abreast on this and just so many issues. There's a plethora of issues that you're involved with at Liberty Counsel. This one is perhaps taking front and center this week. There's many other issues, but I know you're watching what's going on for high school graduations, and you're just monitoring constantly the pulse beat of this nation on the freedom of religion, freedom of speech issues. Give us your website information, if you would.
Yes. Jim, the website is for Liberty Counsel, lc.org. That's lc.org, just two letters, lc.org. And we do have our graduation campaign coming, so if you know of graduation issues that are coming up, let us know. In fact, just this Saturday, we graduated at Liberty University School of Law, Megan Chapman. 7 years ago, I was introduced to her because we learned about her graduation prayer situation. We got involved. It's a long story. But now she's graduating 7 years later from the law school and is going to be the ACLU's worst nightmare.
Praise the Lord for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they tried to silence her. We got involved, and her graduation was anything but a silent graduation.
Matt, you are making this argument before the Court of Appeals here this week. You said 2 to 3 months that you anticipate a decision. Possibly whichever party loses is going to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Possible oral arguments spring of 2014, a decision by June of 2014. If that scenario pans out, isn't Obamacare supposed to be fully implemented by the end of this year? I mean, starting January 1? I mean, what happens in the meantime?
Yeah, well, what we're asking for in the meantime is at least an injunction to block its enforcement, to put it on hold, and that's really what the race is to get this injunction to block it in the meantime until we get a final decision from the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's what I'm going to be asking for this Thursday, to have a temporary reprieve, block it, because otherwise, between now and January 1, all the employers across the country and all individuals and states, they're going to have to be complying with this. And it's exceptionally burdensome. We're not ready for it. Even if you wanted to have it, we're not ready for it because the states and the federal government and employers just don't know what to do. I mean, this thing is the most – you talk about the tax code being convoluted. This is a very convoluted system, very burdensome, very expensive, and it takes a lot of analysis to figure out what you're going to be doing. And frankly, the HHS doesn't even know how to implement that, and that's why you have people like Max Baucus, who was a supporter of this, and others that say this is a train wreck. You got one person who's appointed by the president to be the technical expert, and he says, "Boy, I sure hope we don't become like a third world country under this Obamacare." I mean, he's the guy that has been appointed as the technical expert of this for the whole country. And he's worried that we're going to be turned into a third world country because of this Obamacare law.
Folks, we're talking about irreparable harm taking place here. Let's go to John in Alabama. You're on the air, John.
Yes, I was contacted by Citizens United for America, and they stated that the Supreme Court had said that the Obamacare was a tax. Right. Also, I heard that it was originated in the Senate, and the Constitution, from what I understand, says taxes have to originate in the House. Is there anything to that?
Yes. In fact, that's what I had mentioned earlier. Liberty Counsel is the only case in the country, our case, that actually raises that issue right now. The Supreme Court surprised everybody with this 5-4 decision and said that the individual mandate could be upheld as a tax. Well, if it's a tax, which I disagree with, but that's what they said, then you've got to make sure that taxes are complying with the Constitution.
Yes.
And that requires that taxes originate in the House. If you go all the way back to pre-America and then the early Revolution and then, of course, the Constitution, remember the taxation without representation issues, got in the Declaration of Independence, because of the fact that people don't want to be taxed without proper representation. We required that taxing provisions originate in the House, and if it originates outside the House, it's invalid. This originated in the Senate, not the House. So we're actually, our argument is that this entire law is invalid if, in fact, it is a tax.
Yes, I agree. Another thing I'd like to add is I don't see anything about this Obama 2016. If everybody would watch that movie, they would see what his agenda is.
Thank you for your call here today, John. We're going next to Madison, Wisconsin. Sandra, you're on the air.
Yes, my question
Sandra, I need to have
is,
you turn your radio down, please, Sandra.
Me, I am an insulin-dependent diabetic. And
excuse me, Sandra, I need to have you turn the radio down. We're getting feedback there, please.
Sure.
Sandra, I need the radio off, please.
Okay, hang on just a minute.
Okay, folks, again, make sure the radio is down as you talk to us here because of the delay in feedback. Okay, Sandra, are you with us? Okay, you hold the line. We'll come back to you. We're going to Twin Falls, Idaho. Dennis, you're on the air.
Yeah, my question is for Mr. Staver. Wasn't he in the courts when he fought this thing to begin with, as whether it was legal or not to even be Obamacare, and now is this just an issue for the freedom of religious part of it?
No. I mentioned before there are 60 cases that are out there that are just on the freedom of religion. Our lawsuit includes that challenge. We're arguing that it does violate the free exercise of religion because of the forced funding of abortion for employers and for individuals. But unlike any other lawsuit out there, ours is much broader than that. It has other complaints, other arguments. And one argument is that the entire employer mandate for religious and secular employers across the board is unconstitutional. No other case has that argument. And then we also argue that it violates the origination clause as well.
Okay, so hopefully if this does, they will completely throw it out as even being taxed then?
Well, if we knock out the entire employer mandate, then that would basically take the engine out of the car. If we knock down this under the origination clause, that taxes must originate in the House, not the Senate, then it blows up the entire Obamacare. The whole thing is gone completely. Now, if the employer mandate is gone, it's not going to function. It's like an engine taken out of the car. It looks like a car, but it's not going to work. Obviously, if the origination clause is successful as an argument, then the whole thing is blown up. And obviously, there's no Obamacare left after that. The whole law is unconstitutional.
Appreciate your call. Matt, let me quickly interject breaking news here. Dr. Kermit Gosnell has just been found guilty murdering infants in late-term abortions. We understand he's been found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. Your comment here.
Well, I think it's good justice that has been brought here to Kermit Gosnell. And I think the reason why the mainstream media for so long tried to ignore this particular case is because if he committed murder, which he did, by snipping the spinal columns of these babies right after they were born, and if that is horrible and just gross brutality, which it is, then why do we allow that just a few minutes earlier when they're in the womb? This is what partial birth abortion did. This is what abortion is. What Gosnell is doing, what you see happening here, is not some aberration, some guy who's just out there in left field. He represents abortion. And when you come face-to-face with the reality of what he did, you come face-to-face with the reality of abortion. Yeah. And that's why the mainstream media did not want to cover this. And this is significant. I'm glad the verdict was reached. I'm glad that they found him guilty. And I pray that this particular case also now gets additional media coverage and ultimately wakes up the hearts of people. One of the reporters that did cover this was a pro-abortion person, believing in abortion. But because of seeing the reality of this, changed the position and now believes in the sanctity of human life, that abortion is wrong and murder.
Folks, again, this is from Fox News. Dr. Gosnell just convicted of first-degree murder. The jury issued their verdict, could face execution in the deaths of 3 babies who authorities say were delivered alive and then killed with scissors. at this clinic. So that's breaking news take place. And one other quick note, we understand we're just monitoring as well. Right now, arguments are being made right now on the Minnesota Senate floor. They're seeking to bring about same-sex marriage, so-called same-sex marriage in the state of Minnesota. Passed the House last week in Minnesota, and now, right now as I speak, in debate on the Senate floor. Let's go back to Sandra in Madison, Wisconsin. Sandra, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My question earlier was that when you were talking about the healthcare system, under Obamacare, that I am a insulin-dependent diabetic, and if this law goes through or whatever like this, is this going to affect something like me being able to obtain insulin? Because, of course, I need that to survive. That's my question.
Well, it could and it couldn't. Depends upon the situation. Obviously, insulin is something that you need, but one of the things that was part of this Obamacare law is the person who was an advisor to President Obama, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, the brother of Rahm Emanuel, the then chief of staff. His philosophy is part of this particular law, and his philosophy is complete lies theory, that you put your money into those people who can lead complete lives. In other words, 0 to 13, you ration, and 41 and on to the end of life, you ration. It's only between 13 years of age and 40 that you put your health care dollars. You don't put them in 0 to 13 because people may not live to have a complete life. And you ration it after 40 because people consume more health care and become, quote, less productive, close quote. At least that's in their view. So yes and no. Depends upon other complications that you have. Depends upon your age. No question there's going to be rationing. That's in part what this 15-member panel is about, and that's why people don't want to be on it.
The Independent Payment Advisory Board.
That's right.
That's a big question mark, big unknown at this point. Appreciate your call to Loves Park, Illinois. Sue, go ahead. You're on the air with Mat Staver.
Hi. I was just, I'm glad that they found that guy guilty because I was an adopted baby. I was not even saved when Roe v. Wade came into law, and I was so anti-abortion. People said, "Well, but you weren't saved," and I said, "Well, it's not right." Mm-hmm. I mean, people who have a mind and are thinking properly know that killing babies is wrong.
Yeah,
but that's off the track.
So, yeah.
My real question was, is this going to affect Medicaid and Medicare? Is it going to take the place of that?
Well, it definitely affects Medicaid and Medicare in the sense of, under this particular law, states will be required to substantially increase the participation in Medicaid. Well, Medicaid already is a system that needs to have some reform because it just simply cannot sustain itself. And now you're going to increase it. And so there's a lot of issues with Medicaid already, and this is going to make it even worse. So, there's only so much money to go around. And when you increase the size of this thing, this is going to, in some states, increase Medicaid coverage by 50%. It will also impact those on Medicaid. It'll impact, I think, eventually those on Medicare. It's going to impact individuals in the private health system as well.
Mat Staver with us. Thanks for the call. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. We're continuing our series on a biblical worldview and money, 20 points. We're on point number 11 today, which is you cannot serve God and serve money. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24 speaks to this. You will either love one and hate the other, but you can't love both, God and money. Again, money's not evil. It's the love of money that's the problem. So you can't serve God and serve money. What happens? You compromise. You end up compromising for the money. And we see many people doing that today, don't we? We see a lot of people that are in Christian ministry that compromise biblical truth to appeal to more people for the love of money. Let's not do that. Number 12, don't be anxious about material things. Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 to 31 speaks to this. Don't be anxious, but in everything, make your request known to God. God is more than able to supply all of our needs. We don't need to be anxious about money.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. Our guest today is attorney Mat Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. They are a nonprofit litigation, education, and policy organization that is dedicated to advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of life, and the family. Our number to Crosstalk, I see a couple open lines here, 800-733-9829. 800-733-9829. Matt will be arguing before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. I believe that's in Richmond, Matt?
Yes, that'll be in Richmond, Virginia.
And that's taking place on Thursday of this week, and then a couple, 3 months before we know what their decision is. And so be praying for Matt. Be praying that the Lord give him clarity as he gives his oral arguments before the court. Be praying that the clarity of understanding will be there on the part of the three judges that will be hearing this, and that the Lord will turn their hearts to do that which is right. And folks, there's a huge battle that is before us right now. I hear across this nation the battle for values, the battle for the battle, Matt, really for spiritual principles, and for that which the Word of God upholds as moral and decent, for that to be advanced.
It really is. I mean, we're seeing this all over the country. I mean, just today, as we're talking about this, we got Obamacare oral argument this weekend. We have Kermit Gosnell being found guilty of murder of these innocent babies. We have Minnesota looking at adopting same-sex marriage. We had Delaware just do that. I mean, we are seeing an onslaught against our Christian and family and moral values like no other time in history. And that's why I think we need to be educated. We need to be informed. We need not get discouraged. God's called us to be salt and light, and that's what we need to do. But we need to not simply be discouraged, and we need to be informed. We've got to be able to engage the culture. And I encourage each and every person there to get involved with an organization, with VCY, Liberty Counsel, others, to be able to make sure that they make a difference.
Their website is lc.org. Let's go to Iretta from Milwaukee. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi. I just want to, first, thank you for taking my call. Mr. Staver, my husband and I have been supporters of Liberty Counsel for a lot of years now. And I just want to thank you for all that you do, and I thank Crosstalk for all that you do. We'll be fasting and praying as you go before the courts on Thursday, and fasting and praying in the months to come. I just wanted to also say, if I could, that I'm so happy that Kermit Gosnell was found guilty. I had an abortion 40 years ago myself, and it was at the time when they used to say it's just a blob of tissue. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the church, but I didn't know any better. I really didn't. And it causes me so much pain now to think what I did. And I know that God's forgiven me, but now I just have to forgive myself. And I don't want any other woman to go through the pain that it causes you years down the road when you realize what you did. And I just pray that other ladies and other young girls will realize that that's a baby, and it's going to cause you pain down the road. It's going to hurt, and it's a hurt that takes a long time to get over. I pass on everything I hear on Crosstalk, and my family has actually blacklisted me because of the things that I pass on, and I try to get them to see and understand about Obama and the things that he's doing. I'm African American, and they love Obama, and I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I'm no longer welcome in my family. They kicked me off the Facebook page and literally actually just blacklisted me, and it's okay, because I need to continue to pass on what I'm finding out, and I have to worry about not pleasing God. Yeah. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. is do all I can for the kingdom on this earth, and just keep praying for my family that God will touch their hearts, soften their heart, and open their eyes.
Loretta, thank you so much. Matt, your thoughts to her.
Thank you. You can contact lc.org, our website, and also we've got a special website, lifeunited.org, lifeunited.org. It's a special website that we've created in conjunction with Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar and others for pro-life resources, including counseling, post-traumatic issues that you have with regards to abortion. God forgives you. If you ask for forgiveness, God forgives you and casts those sins away as far as the east is from the west, buries them into the bottom of the sea, and doesn't remember them, and will set you free. And what you're doing to be able to instruct and warn people about this horrible situation of abortion is a blessing to many people. I was a pastor, and when I was pastoring, I did not know about abortion until someone invited me to watch a video about it, and I was stunned by what I saw. It wasn't just some blob of tissue, as I had been led to believe in the media. When I looked at it, I was stunned. As a pastor, I didn't know these things. And that's what ultimately changed my direction, and ultimately that's why I'm in law right now, to be able to fight for the sanctity of human life, to fight for these unborn children, and to fight for mothers that are victimized by this abortion clinic industry. The interesting thing is Planned Parenthood wanted to eliminate and reduce the black race, also Roman Catholics and Jews, but particularly began to set up abortion clinics, Margaret Sanger did, in black communities. The Black Panthers, when they originally began, one of their targets was to get Planned Parenthood out of these black communities because they were ultimately killing the black community. And they ultimately pushed back against Planned Parenthood and their eugenics program. So thank you for standing up. God bless you. You're a great voice.
Loretta, there's a group called Life Dynamics, and they have produced a powerful DVD called Ma'afa 21. And it really lets you see how the African American community targeted by Planned Parenthood, targeted by Margaret Sanger, and would be a real help and tool there. I'm out of time, but thank you so much for your call here today. Matt, take the last 30 seconds to give a final thought with our listeners here, if you would.
Well, you heard this powerful testimony that was just here, and I think we need to be able to reach out to women and moms who are being fed the lie regarding abortion because they do go down this road and they don't know what they're doing, and we need to reach out. Everyone has a voice. I pray for this case with regards to the Obamacare Liberty Counsel's case because it is a massive abortion funding machine. Pray that we have ultimate victory, and you can go to lc.org for more information.
And Matt, if you'll hang on the line just a moment, folks, be praying for Matt as he goes before the court on Thursday of this week. Be praying for the Minnesota Senate that is meeting right now, arguing in regard to the matter of same-sex marriage. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the Internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.